Okay, good evening. It is June 8th, 7 p.m. Welcome to the San Marino Unified School District Board of Education meeting. Here is your board president, Shelley Ryan.
Thank you, Dr. Choi. I do not have anything to report from closed session this evening. I'd like to open up our regular open session. I'd like to call to order and ask everyone to please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Dr. Choi, will you lead us?
Hand over your heart, let's begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Choi. May I have an approval for our agenda this evening?
I move to approve the agenda as presented for this evening.
Thank you, Mrs. Chung.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Chang. And so with that, I would like to call roll call. Mr. Chang?
Aye.
Thank you. Mrs. Chung?
Aye.
Mrs. Ryan? Aye. And so the agenda moves on. Approval of minutes. Action item, this is for May 25th, 2021, Board of Education meeting minutes as read. Is there a motion?
I move to approve the minutes from the May 25th board meeting.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Chung and Mr. Chang. Roll call for approval of the minutes. Mrs. Chung?
Aye.
Mr. Chang?
Aye.
Mrs. Ryan? Aye. So moved, the approval of the minutes. Next, we have the public comment section. This is a procedural item. The Board of Education has adopted Board Policy 9323D. This is to ensure the public's right to be heard in any matters pertaining to the San Marino Unified School District. Persons who wish to provide public comment will have three options to submit public comments: submit through an online form, request to speak during the meeting through question and answer and phone dial-in, request to speak during the meeting in person via the public comment card. You may submit an online form. The public may submit public comments for the open or closed session on June 8th from 11 through 3:30 p.m. Comments received during this time will not be read during the meeting, but will be provided to the Board of Education. There were no public comments made as of 3:30 p.m. today. Request to speak during the meeting via question and answer and phone dial-in. During public comment, the meeting will pause for 1 minute to take requests to speak. Raise your hand function is used to take requests during the public comment period. For online attendees, press the raise hand icon to add yourself to the queue. For phone attendees, dial *9. The speaking order will be determined based on the order of requests received. Individual speakers will be unmuted and called to speak. Request to speak during the meeting in person via the public comment card. Please complete the public comment card. Submit the completed card to the designated drop box with the assistant to the superintendent no later than when the agenda section items that are not on the agenda in the consent section, in the information section, or in the action section is called by the board president. Opportunities for public comment are offered prior to closed session at the start of the regular open session for items not on the agenda prior to consent. Information and action items for matters on the agenda. The Board of Education reserves the right to add a public comment period prior to any individual item on the agenda. 5 minutes may be allotted to each speaker, maximum of 20 minutes to each subject matter. However, in the event there are more than 4 speakers on the same subject matter, the board president retains the discretion to adjust and limit the time allocated to each speaker to ensure that all wishing to speak will be heard within the 20-minute allotment. 7A, communication from the audience regarding matters that are not on the agenda are to be made at this time. This is an information. Dr. Choi.
Thank you, President Ryan. We are pausing for 1 minute to take requests to speak regarding matters not on the agenda. If you would like to make a request to speak, please press the raise hand icon. If you're joining by phone, dial *9, or if you are in person, please submit a public comment card. we have 30 seconds remaining. If you would like to make a request to speak, please press the raise hand icon, dial *9, or submit a public comment card.
Oh, wait.
Okay, President Ryan, we have no requests.
Thank you, Dr. Choi. Next, in 7B, we have communications from the audience regarding matters that are on the consent agenda section and are to be made at this time. This, again, is an informational item. Dr. Choi.
Thank you, President Ryan. Again, we're pausing for 1 minute to take requests to speak regarding matters in the consent section. If you would like to make a request to speak regarding consent items, please press the raise hand icon, dial *9, or submit a public comment card. President Ryan, we have no requests.
Thank you, Dr. Choi. As we have no requests to speak, we will move on to the consent section. May I have a motion to approve the consent section? That's section 8A to 8F.
For President, before we move to action, I have a question about the AC contract and agreement report. So I'd like to ask Dr. Territory for the contract of a right at the school. Either we have any change from the content from the last year compared to the coming year?
No, Mr. Chang, the contract should be the same as past years.
Okay. With that, I'd like to move to approve for the consent section from the AA to AF.
I am happy to second that, but I did have another question. Do we continue with the motion and then discuss?
You may, is it a question on the same
Yes.
item?
Yes.
Okay, so why don't we stop?
Okay.
We have Mr. Chang's motion on the floor, but you may have your question.
Okay, so I just wanted to clarify, in the contract that we're looking at, it does refer to year 2021. But I assume that this contract will be with regard to year 21-22. Section 7.
Yes, I believe that is a typo that needs to be corrected. Thank you for pointing that out.
Okay, so then we just need to adjust for those dates to reflect the next following school year, not the one we just concluded. And then did we have any feedback regarding services performed by Right at School? Was it anything?
Well, I had a lot of positive feedback from members of the community in addition to our own employees who are utilizing the services of Right at School. It seems to be very advantageous for working parents to be able to take advantage of an on-campus program such as Right at School.
Great, thank you. And then I think we're all looking possibly to even expand that to another site if possible.
Yes, depending on the number of students that sign up for the program, we are willing to find space for them and to expand it if necessary.
Great, thank you.
You're
With
welcome.
that, I would second the motion for the consent agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Chang, and thank you, Mrs. Chung, for that motion. So, Mrs. Chung,
Aye.
Mr. Chang,
Aye.
Mrs. Ryan, aye. The motion passes for the consent section, 8A to 8F. Under the communication section, this is a procedural item, communication from the Board of Education. Mr. Chang.
First of all, as you know, the last 4 weeks, we have a full school sign graduation. First of all, I want to congratulate our students, senior and 8th grade, and also 5th grade, and also their parents. I think during the COVID-19 pandemic, we make it. Yeah. So I also want to thank you for all the school district administrator and also for school side principal and the teacher and the staff. I think that this collective effort, we make it. Congratulations. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Chang. Mrs. Chung.
Thank you. So I just wanted to comment a little bit on some of the training that I underwent. I completed my master's in governance training this week, and it was a really great experience to be able to focus on my governance role in promoting student learning and achievement. I was also reminded of the importance of working with my fellow board members and my superintendent as a governance team to build capacity for our principals so that they in turn may support their teachers and staff to directly meet the student needs. One of the notions they continued to bring up was a lighthouse, they called it the lighthouse study, and they talked about high performing boards, and high performing boards would spend more than a majority of their time on student learning and achievement, and then some time in community relations and some time in facilities and finance. And that was a really great perspective for me to maintain as I always looked at the work we were doing and what our focus was on, and to also keep a multi-year financial perspective. That was sort of the new thing I took away from that, to really ensure that we have financial stability as a district. And I really enjoyed the opportunity to interact with other trustees and superintendents who were there both in the new capacity and as an experienced board member, because I think being new myself, it was important to be able to learn from others and hear with their perspectives on how they dealt with the same things we were going through, whether it was COVID, lack of funding, declining enrollment. And there was a sense of comfort in knowing we weren't alone in what we were facing. I think for myself, it was just important to be able to walk away from that with remembering what the impact is on students in whatever we do. And on that note, I think also I share Mr. Chang's highlights that being able to see all of the in-person graduations this past week was just such a thrill. And my own daughter promoted, and yet that was just such a small blip for me compared to being able to see all of the families and all of the students celebrate the success from the past year, which I really just do credit all of our staff and faculty with going above and beyond to be able to meet that need for our students.
Thank you, Mrs. Chung, and I want to echo my fellow board members in congratulating each student as they promote to the next level, as well as graduation, 5th grade, 8th grade, and onward to college and beyond. My report this evening has, I don't want to repeat any of the comments. I had a great opportunity to join the speech and debate final picnic celebration. Mr. Slim and his coaches did a fabulous job. I think Mr. Chang and I felt very honored to be there. They were very inclusive, and we got to see some of the kids in action in their speaking. So I was a little nervous when they asked me to speak because I didn't do speech and debate. Then I also attended with my husband, who's the president of City Club, and he presented an award for the girls basketball at their end of the year banquet. And so, Real Foods, is that the place? Okay. Anyways, in South Pasadena, or in Pasadena, we went there, and that was also a wonderful evening, full of tribute for their coach and full of tribute in terms of just them coming together during a very tough year when they didn't know if their season was going to go on, and the girls really bonded. So congratulations to all the girls in basketball and as well as speech and debate. And congratulations to all of our students who was resilient and who kind of overcame this year and is definitely a product of our San Marino Unified School District. So thank you. Next up, we have communication from our Assistant Superintendent, Dr. Linda Delatorre.
Thank you, President Ryan. As Mrs. Chon, mentioned, earlier this year, the Board of Education adopted a policy that requires all new board members to complete the CSBA's Masters in Governance training program. I'm very pleased to announce, as she did earlier, that she has completed all 5 modules successfully, which demonstrates an exceptional commitment to professional development in the service of students. This accomplishment signifies a mastery of the roles and responsibilities of school boards and a strong understanding of the knowledge and skills needed to build and sustain an effective school governance program. This helps produce better outcomes for students. You mentioned the Lighthouse Inquiry Study, which is something that I paid close attention to during the writing of my dissertation. And it is a well-known fact that high-performing boards of education produce high-performing schools and students. The fact that you have completed this program is no easy task, being a full-time mother and a full-time board member. So we congratulate you on the successful completion of this program and would like to present you with the CSBA's completion certificate, along with a CSBA commemorative pin. So there you are. Congratulations. So President Ryan, in addition to that, I am very pleased to announce that San Marino High School educator, Mrs. Jamie Linton, has received the John B. and Margaret K. Norberg Award for Excellence in Teaching. She was voted for this wonderful, prestigious award by her peers. Jamie's name will be added to the perpetual plaque with such honorees as Cynthia Chubbuck, Kara Huang, Lisa Davidson, and David Irier. Additionally, she will receive $2,500 for use in her classroom to purchase supplies, conference attendance, etc. Jamie won because she exemplifies what it means to be a Titan teacher. A Titan teacher is, among other things, caring, relational, reflective, adaptive, patient, and engaging. A Titan teacher goes above and beyond to provide every student with the greatest opportunity to grow into their best self. They guide students to and through struggle. Now I would like to turn it over to San Marino High School Principal, Mr. Jason Kurtenbach, to say a few words about Mrs. Linton.
Thank you, Assistant Superintendent Dr. De La Torre, President Ryan, members of the board and the executive team for providing me this opportunity to recognize one of San Marino High School's stellar teachers, Mrs. Jamie Linton, as you said, recipient of the 2021 John B. and Margaret K. Norberg Award for Teaching Excellence. This award was established by John and Margaret's 2 sons, and I had the honor of sitting with one of them. And he explained to me that this meant a lot to his family because from his perspective and from the perspective of his parents, San Marino had given them so much that they always wished they could do more. And they understood that the reason that they were as successful as they were in their lives were because of the teachers that had guided them through. Jamie has faithfully served the students of San Marino in many capacities, not just in the classroom, where she is the math department chair, teaching everything from Algebra 1 to honors math analysis and AP calculus, all just in this past year. But she also accepted an additional period foregoing her prep in order to make sure that our students who needed the small class sizes the most in Algebra 1 would receive them. However, as I said, Jamie is not only a math teacher. She has also been a driving force in getting the Girls Who Code Club started and thriving on our campus, even during COVID, where weekly she would regularly serve as the faculty advisor in 2-hour-long Zoom meetings on Fridays. Yes, Fridays. When everyone else was ready to tap out, Jamie always was there for her kids. Jamie is also the faculty advisor for the Gay Straight Alliance Club, which helps teens discover who they are in a safe, welcoming, and non-judgmental environment. However, I am probably personally most grateful, and this is the selfish part of me, for Jamie's candor, her kindness, and her open communication throughout the time we have worked together. As I came onto campus this year, I always knew that Jamie was one I could call on in a moment to give me clear and honest response that was worth its weight in gold. So please join me in congratulating Mrs. Linton on receiving the 2021 John B. and Margaret K. Norberg Award for Excellence in Teaching.
Congratulations, Mrs. Linton, and so well deserving. Next, we have communication from the audience regarding matters on the information agenda, and they're to be made at this time. This is an informational item. Dr. Choi.
Thank you, President Ryan. We will pause 1 minute to take requests regarding matters in the information section item, in the information section. If you'd like to make a request to speak regarding information items, please press the raise hand icon, dial *9, or submit a public comment card. We have 30 seconds remaining. If you would like to make a request to speak regarding information items on the agenda, please press the raise hand icon, dial *9, or submit a public comment card. President Ryan, we have no requests.
Thank you, Dr. Choi. 11, information items. This is a procedural item. We have 11A, San Marino Schools Foundation Campaign Report, and this is also an informational item. Dr. Linda Delatorre, please.
Thank you, President Ryan. Thank you, President Ryan, members of the Board of Education, executive team. This evening, I would just like to briefly review the process for appointing a member of the public of the San Marino community to the Board of Education. As the board is aware, there were 7 applicants for this important position. At the meeting recently held on, was it Tuesday? No, Monday, excuse me, Monday. I'm losing track of my week. On Monday.
This is on the foundation.
Oh, the school's foundation, I'm sorry, I was on the wrong item. I apologize, excuse me. Yes, I would like to introduce Erin Bilvato, the president of the San Marino Schools Foundation, along with Zaina Dowd. If Zaina is here, she is the treasurer of the San Marino Schools Foundation, to provide the Board of Education with an update on potential pledges related to the Measure E campaign on the ballot for June 29th. With that, Erin, Zaina.
Welcome, Erin and Zaina.
Good evening. We just have a very brief update for the school board this evening. At your last meeting, we had the opportunity to share with you that the foundation was pledging approximately $1.7 million to support the rescission of pink slips for our teachers. And we're here to report to you tonight that we're able to increase that pledge amount by $420,000. So that would be an additional approximate 4.2 FTEs or positions that you would be able to take action on as you determine as a school board. So we really wanted to make sure that you were aware of that. and we're able to move forward accordingly. So that was our update for this evening. Azena, anything else that you would like to add?
No, you said it perfectly. We're just very happy and pleased that we were able to rally the community. The community was just amazing, and everybody loves the district and love our teachers and supporting it. And we're just really happy that we were able to be able to pledge some more dollars towards rescinding some more teaching positions.
Wow, that's just awesome. And I want to just, on behalf of the board, just to thank the work of the foundation and all of the parents and the community who came out and rallied, gave up Saturdays, who we are, and really just kind of led our community and kind of brought us together behind the children to support our children and to lift them up. So thank you again, San Marino Schools Foundation, Aaron and Zaina.
Have a good evening.
Oh,
No, just was thank you very much for your support, and we will be back in July with the final report out of our cumulative campaign for the year. So we appreciate the time this evening. Thank you very much.
thank you so much. Under 11B, this is board vacancy process eligible candidates. This is Dr. Linda Delatorre.
Thank you. Okay. So the board has 7 candidates that applied for the board vacancy. As you are aware, we have 2 seats available. The one that we are currently processing is for Mr. Barbari's seat. The 7 candidates were screened by a subcommittee, which is comprised of less than a quorum of the board, and that was board clerk Mrs. Chong and board member C. Joseph Chang. All 7 were found to be eligible pending further verification. And what we're doing now is we're going to be talking about the questions that will be asked. I believe we have basically come to consensus on that. We're looking at having each board member ask each of the candidates 2 questions each. Each candidate will be afforded 1 minute and 30 seconds to respond to each of the questions that they are asked. We will have a timekeeper, and that will be Dr. Choi, who will be keeping the time on each of the responses that are delivered. We will be meeting in this room. It will be agendized as a special meeting for the purposes of engaging the candidates in this interview process. Do you have any questions for me?
Just wanted to add also, Dr. Delatorre, you did a wonderful job just kind of summarizing this process and then just the structure in which. Just wanted to also add that yesterday in our special board meeting, I did read the list of the candidates. And today we also put on our website and published one of their statements to kind of give you a little more depth of who these candidates are. And then I invite you to join us on Thursday to really get a closer look at our candidates. We will see them for probably just under 2 hours, and each of them will have 6 questions at about 1.5 minutes apiece. And then of course there's in between time. So we're looking at quite a number of minutes to kind of give the candidates an opportunity to not only address our community, but also just to understand the process in which the selection is very important to us. We want to thank everyone for applying, but we want to make sure that we give everybody equal opportunity to kind of speak to the public on that. So this is a provisional seat for Mr. Corey Barbary.
And then also it's important to note that the board member that is selected will be seated, sworn in and seated on the 10th.
Can I just say, so I just wanted to thank you, Dr. Delatorre. I know that just to clarify, we submit questions in order to have a nice breadth across each of the school board members to be able to glean as much information as we can in 1.5 minutes per question. And just to clarify that that really is a process in which we're seeking to add depth and breadth of each of the candidates and what they bring to this role. And then to clarify for the next point that the fourth board member will then participate in the process of the selection of the fifth, right?
Yes,
Okay.
that is correct. Yes,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Board President, I would like to make a comment. As a public didn't make a comment on this agenda so far, but for last couple of days, we received the email, I think collectively, but because for a brown area, we are not the answer. So the board president is the one response. But I just want to say whatever the public has a concern, we already received. Yeah, so I just want to make sure, you know, the whoever write an email, I want, as a board member, I want acknowledge, yeah, we did receive your email. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chang, for that reminder. And so it reminds me to thank the community for always writing in, and just reminding the community that the board president responds to your emails and your notifications, so that we don't have Brown Act violation with everybody responding because we respond as a board. Thank you, Mr. Chang. All right, next, if there are no further questions or comments, 11C is resolution number 21 to fully reopen schools for the fall 2021. This is the first reading. It's an informational item. Dr. Linda Delatorre.
Thank you, President Ryan, members of the Board of Education, the executive team. This evening, we are presenting to you Board Resolution number 21 for a first reading. Whereas Education Code Section 43504B provides that local educational agencies shall offer in-person instruction to the greatest extent possible. And whereas the Board of Education recognizes the importance of providing in-person educational opportunities and is committed to safely expanding these opportunities. And whereas the Board of Education recognizes that the health and safety of students and staff is the district's highest priority, and the district has planned extensively to safely expand in-person educational opportunities in the manner that best serves district students' academic and social emotional learning needs and mitigates against the risks of COVID-19. And now therefore be it resolved and ordered by the Board of Education of the San Marino Unified School District that in order to offer in-person instruction to the greatest extent possible for the 21-22 school year, the district has and will expand its in-person educational opportunities. And be it further resolved that effective February 22nd, 2021, the district began offering elementary grade TK through second students the opportunity to attend school for in-person instruction 5 days per week. And be it further resolved that effective March 10th, 2021, the district began offering elementary grade 3 through 5 students the opportunity to attend school for in-person instruction 5 days per week. And be it further resolved that effective April 1st, 2021, the district began offering all middle and high school students the opportunity to attend school for in-person instruction 2 days per week and 4 days per week. And be it further resolved that effective April 26, 2021, the district began offering all middle school students the opportunity to attend school for in-person instruction 4 days per week. And be it further resolved that effective at the beginning of the 21-22 school year, the district will offer in-person instruction 5 days per week. And be it further resolved that it is the intent of the Board of Education that the district's base instructional model for the 21-22 school year will be in-person instruction, and that staff will continue to undertake planning efforts to ensure that this instructional model is implemented on the first day of the 21-22 school year on August 11th, 2021. The district will implement the bell schedules that have been adopted by the Board of Education for the 21-22 school year prior to the COVID-19 public health emergency. And that is the first reading of resolution number 21.
Thank you, Dr. Delatorre. And at this point, I want to make sure that I thank our staff our faculty, our cabinet and our board for their dedication. Since the school closures in March, we have had a series of guidelines, protocols, and procedures to put in place to ensure the safety of our students and our school community. It has been just wonderful to see the parents supportive, our students coming back joyfully to school, and our teachers welcoming them back. And so in the fall, we look forward to a more traditional opening of school. We look forward to really returning back to a more traditional role, although I would suggest that education has changed pretty much, so that we're going to always continue to look at how we're going to implement technology and advance and move that forward, because I think this is a wonderful opportunity for us to take advantage of that. So also, that was a backwards thank you, Dr. Choi, for all that you did to get us ready. Thank you. All right, next we have 11D. This is technology update. How's that for an opening, Dr. Choi? E-rate and infrastructure. This is an informational item. Dr. Stephen Choi.
Perfect segue. Thank you, President Ryan, members of the board and the executive team. It's my pleasure to provide an update regarding the district's technical infrastructure plan and discuss how we can have the opportunity to leverage E-rate funding and one-time ESSER funds to upgrade our aging infrastructure. In 2019 and 2020, many school districts like ours benefited from the Federal CARES Act funding to implement new technologies. This slide may look familiar as it was presented in my January 2021 presentation. I would like to remind the board that our district used these funds for student and staff devices, which directly and positively impacted the education of our students while they were learning from home and while they returned to school. It is important to note that while the needs of our staff and students were rightfully prioritized, our infrastructure needs were appropriately deferred. This slide summarizes the technical infrastructure needs of our district in 3 categories. First, cybersecurity must continue to be prioritized. This summer, we are implementing endpoint detection and managed threat response, also known as EDR and MTR, for our cyber-sensitive assets. These are typically computers in the technology, business, HR, and special education departments. EDR/MTR devices are actively analyzed for ransomware and phishing activities. In the event of a cybersecurity incident, these protected devices are deactivated to prevent malicious spread. The second area of need is within our core network services, specifically the appliances that provide DNS, DHCP, and IPAM will be replaced this summer. Our network can have anywhere from 2,000 to 9,000 devices at any given time, and our DDI appliances are essential for getting devices onto the network. Our 10-plus-year-old DDI appliances will be one less thing keeping me up at night. Finally, the third area of need is our network switches and Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi today is as important as the air we breathe. Chromebooks, iPads, laptops, desktops, projectors, flat panels, phones, cameras, thermostats, sprinklers, and even the Zoom meeting that we are on right now depend on our network switch and Wi-Fi infrastructure. In January, I reported that the district created an RFP, competitively bid for quotes, and submitted an E-rate application requesting for discounts for switches and Wi-Fi. Today, I'm pleased to report that our E-rate application was reviewed and that our Category 2 budget is determined to be $469,103. This means that E-rate will provide funds in the form of a discount that is up to 40% of the C2 budget. This information provides us an opportunity to revisit our infrastructure plan. E-rate will provide 40% of $469,103, which translates to approximately $187,000, $461.20. The district is still responsible for the non-discounted portion of $257,815.38. Fortunately, federal ESSER funds are qualified to be used to cover the non-discounted costs to replace our switches and Wi-Fi. In summary, by leveraging both E-rate and ESSER funding, our district will be able to significantly enhance the online reliability and safety of our students and faculty. We plan to implement these infrastructure projects this summer, and we're prepared to have all of our students and faculty back on campus this fall. This concludes my update, and I would be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you. Oh, go ahead.
Yes.
So two cell phone tower been removed. So for the efficiency or whatever.
Well, the cell phone towers do not play a significant role in terms of our students having access to the internet in the classrooms. We rely and depend heavily on our own network infrastructure, our own switches, our own Wi-Fi within the classrooms. So there's not too much overlap in terms of the cell towers and our Wi-Fi and switches.
Dr. Choi, I just wanted to ask you the question. As we are prepared, we are now one-to-one for each student. And as we're preparing for this, our next level of advancement in technology, where do you envision us going in terms of a school district?
That's a great question. And it really does go back to infrastructure and the importance of the infrastructure, because it provides that foundation to grow in the educational technology space. It allows for other opportunities to arise. So I believe I'm very proud of the fact that our district chose to prioritize student devices and faculty devices when the pandemic hit, because we needed it the most. And then now that as we prepare for students and faculty to come back, we need to bring our infrastructure up to speed to support that growth.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you.
Under 11E, this is a public hearing of the 21-22. This is local control accountability plan. This is an informational item. Dr. Lena Richter.
Thank you, President Ryan, members of the board, Assistant Superintendent Dr. Delatorre, and executive team. Pursuant to Ed Code Section 52062, San Marino Unified School District Local Governing Board must hold a public hearing on the 21-22 Local Accountability Plan to solicit comments from the public on the proposed LCAP. The public hearing must be held at the same meeting as the budget hearing required pursuant to Ed Code 42127 and Administrative Regulation 3100. Also pursuant to Ed Code Section 52062, tonight's public hearing was communicated to the public in the Tribune newspaper, and the proposed LCAP was posted on the district's website for public review on June 2nd. At this time, we will open it up for public hearing, for public input or comment. Dr. Choi?
Thank you, Dr. Richter. We'll pause for 1 minute to take requests to speak regarding the public hearing of the 2021-22 Local Control Accountability Plan. If you would like to make a request to speak, please press the raise hand icon, dial *9, or submit a public comment card. We have 30 seconds remaining for this public hearing of the 2021-22 Local Control Accountability Plan. If you'd like to speak, please press the raise hand icon, dial *9, or submit a public comment card. Okay, we have one request to speak from Miss Lisa Davidson. Lisa Davidson, your line is now open.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay, I know I'm in the wrong spot. I'm always in the wrong place with these comments, but I just really have to say woo-hoo once again to our community, and I'm sorry I'm in the wrong place.
Thank you, Lisa.
All right, thank you, Dr. Choi.
Thank you, Dr.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Choi. And Lisa, we appreciate that comment. Thank you. The LCAP is a comprehensive data-driven planning process.
I think your mic.
No? Is that better?
Perhaps bring the mic a little bit closer. There we go.
There we go. Okay. I'll start all over. Thank you. The LCAP is a community-based, comprehensive, data-driven planning process used to identify annual goals and specific actions aligned with state and local priorities and to facilitate continuous improvement of district practices. The board is mandated to adopt a district-wide local control accountability plan, also known as the LCAP, using the template provided by the State Board of Education, which addresses the 8 state priorities specified in Ed Code 52060 and any local priorities adopted by the board. The LCAP is to be updated on or before July 1st of each year. SMUSD is in the first year of a 3-year LCAP cycle, which will run 2021 to 2024. Next slide, please. Thank you, Dr. Choi. A copy of the full LCAP has been provided in advance for review. The purpose of tonight's presentation is to present an overview of the proposed 2021-22 LCAP. As a requirement of the 21-22 LCAP, annual updates were also conducted for the 2019-20 LCAP, as well as the 2021 Learning Continuity Plan. And lastly, review with the board, the LCAP. I will review the LCAP adoption timeline. Next slide. I would like to start my presentation by recognizing and thanking this year's LCAP Stakeholder Committee members. Each of our members played an integral role in the development of our 2021 LCAP goals, annual measurable outcomes, and actions for the first year of the 2021-24 LCAP 3-year cycle. I would like to thank them specifically for their time, their participation, their input, their feedback, as well as their partnership. They were highly instrumental in the development of this year's LCAP. Thank you to Toby Chow, Dr. Michael Lin, Christine Trauber, Gerard Zhang, Alana Foray, Katie Tang, Ali Eng, Elaine Chu, Claudia Bowles, Gina Aparicio, Daryl Topolian, Stephanie Kalaki, Jose Kerr, Christina Pink, Jason Kurtenbach, Abigail Cabrera, Vanji Lingat, Dr. Jeff Wilson, Dr. Linda Delatorre, and Dr. Stephen Choi. Next slide, please. The 2021 Advisory Committee meetings included the LCAP Stakeholder Committee meeting, which met 5 times this year on these dates we see on this slide, and our DLAC, our District English Learner Advisory Committee, which met 4 times. Today's meeting will serve as the LCAP public hearing meeting, and on June 22nd, the LCAP will be brought back to the board with recommendation for approval. Next slide, please. So we will begin with a brief overview of our 2019-20 LCAP annual update. And I do promise to be brief. I would like to begin just by briefly sharing this slide that highlights the identified 8 state priorities that help students succeed and are required to be addressed in the LCAP. The 8 priorities are categorized into 3 main areas: conditions of learning, which encompasses basic services, implementation of state standards, and course access priorities. Second area is pupil outcomes, which encompasses pupil achievement and other pupil outcome priorities. And the third area is engagement, which encompasses parent involvement, pupil engagement, and school climate priorities. Next slide, please. So the 2019-20 LCAP included 4 goals with related annual measurable outcomes and actions. Goal 1 focused on conditions for learning, which included appropriately assigned teachers and staff, safe and well-equipped facilities, standard aligned instructional materials.
The metrics used for this goal included teacher credentialing, professional development, access to standards-aligned instructional materials, and annual facility inspections. Goal 2 focused on academic achievement, college and career readiness, 21st century learning, and graduation readiness. The metrics for Goal 2 included student outcomes for state testing, English learner progress, AP and honors course offering, graduation rates, AP pass rates, college and career readiness, and more. Goal 3 focused on engagement, including social emotional well-being and mental health, school connectedness. Metrics included attendance and chronic absenteeism rates, suspension and expulsion rates, and climate surveys, the California school surveys, which included surveys for students, staff, and parents. And lastly, Goal 4 focused on parent engagement, expanding communication, participation, and engagement, and input in decision-making. Metrics also included the climate surveys and participation in district and site events and committees such as School Site Council, English Learner Advisory Committee, District English Learner Advisory Committee, and more. Next slide, please. Yes.
Goal 1, the last item, facility inspection tool. So what are they looking for?
The facility inspection tool is a tool that's used by all school districts to assess the facilities to see if they are in good repair. And that's conducted annually. And it's typically conducted by our management and operations department.
Okay.
We are on slide 8. The next few slides will provide just a brief overview of the 2019-20 annual update. It's important to remember that the 2019-20 updates reflects data from nearly 2 years ago, with a year accentuated with school closures in early March of 2020 and suspension of state testing, rendering it a little challenging to obtain various data points for 2020. Goal 1, conditions of learning successes included maintaining 100% fully credentialed and appropriately assigned teachers in TK through grade 12, maintaining schools in good repair as measured by the facility inspection tool, access to standards aligned instructional materials for all students, and as Dr. Choi mentioned, successful rollout of Chromebooks and technology, both during in-person and when we had to quickly transition to distance learning. And lastly, continued and successful implementation of site and district-led professional development. Next slide. For Goal 2, pupil outcome successes included continued high levels of performance in ELA and math overall, as well as by student groups, college and career readiness, where students received blue or green status on the 2019 California School Dashboard. Similarly, English learners demonstrated increased proficiency levels, indicating a little over 3/4 of all of our English learners making progress towards language acquisition. It's important to note that these scores represent 2019 CASP student outcomes. Student score reports or publication of the 2020 California School Dashboard is not available due to the suspension of the 2020 state assessments. We do have various data points for 2020, which we were able to obtain at the local level, such as AP pass rates, graduation rates, attendance rates, and so forth. And those also continue to show high levels of performance. Next slide, please. For Goal 3, engagement successes included the sustainment of high attendance rates for grades 9 through 12, nearly a little over 97%. And zero chronic absenteeism and dropout and expulsion rates. 2021 climate surveys results continued to show strong parent and staff sense of school safety, supportive learning environments that promote academic success and high standards. A couple areas of needed growth that we found in this priority: chronic absenteeism for grades TK through 8 was at 4.35%. Overall suspension rates for 2019-20 were at 1.62%, and the 2021 student reported perceptions of school connectedness, meaningful participation in caring adult relationships to school are able to foster positive and meaningful relationships and participations with their school. The 2021 data here was included as it was more indicative and more value with regards to the most recent actionable data for how students, staff, and parent perceptions of engagement measure, particularly after more than a year of school closures and distance learning.
Dr. Richter?
Yes.
Can you speak a little bit to the chronic absenteeism at the K-8 and that number?
Yes. For,
I'm just
I'm
wondering,
sorry.
it's a little bit higher than it was previously, and what would be some of the reasons behind that you think?
So the reasons could vary. When we're looking at this, we're also remembering that in March of 2020, we transitioned to distance learning. So part of that could be contributed to the transition period where students had to learn to engage in distance learning, become a little more familiar and navigate technology to be able to access the curriculum or be engaged in learning or in school. And so that is something that we're looking at very closely this year to see if that trend continues, particularly in grades TK through 8th grade. But we were very happy to see that it was not the case for high school, for our high school students. And that was a very positive note.
And as well, I remember that we dealt with connectivity issues.
Correct.
So initially, I know that Dr. Choi can speak on this in terms of our Wi-Fi, our hotspots that we had to give to the students who didn't have connectivity. So that may have been some of it.
Absolutely. And that is included in part of that transition of quickly pivoting to distance learning in March. We are on the next slide, slide 11, please. And lastly, for goal 4, parent participation and input in decision making. Some of the successes here are based on the 2021 climate survey for parents and staff. The results indicate strong agreement in opportunities and outreach for parent involvement. And that's key, particularly since 2021 was a year filled with distance learning and school closures. And then continued successful implementation of parent involvement opportunities, which include DLAC, School Site Council, ELAC, albeit through virtual platforms, even when we returned to school in the spring of this past year. Next slide, please. As mentioned earlier, school districts were also required to provide an annual update for their 2021 Learning Continuity Plan, which replaced the LCAP this past year. The Learning Continuity Plan did not include annual measurable outcomes, only review and reflection. The next few slides highlight review and reflection of progress in the various priority areas outlined in the Learning Continuity Plan. As part of this update process, during our LCAP stakeholder meeting, staff members provided updates on required priority areas specific to their departments. And I would like to recognize and thank them for their contributions. This was very helpful in the development of our 21-22 LCAP. A special thank you to Ms. Carol Thompson from Nutrition Services, who provided us an update on school nutrition during this past year. Ms. Tanya El Hindi, who provided an update on wellness and mental health services. Dr. Linda Delatorre and Ms. Vangeline Gatt, who provided updates on our financial status and current fiscal expenditures for this year. And Dr. Stephen Choi provided updates on technology, the rollout of technology throughout this past year. Updates presented by each, again, provided valuable input in the development of not only our 21-22 LCAP, but updating the Learning Continuity Plan. So pursuant to Senate Bill 98 and based on the review and reflection of the Learning Continuity Plan, despite inherent challenges of distance learning and school closures, overall, San Marino Unified School District demonstrated success in maintaining a continuity of instruction, programs, and services throughout this past year. The Learning Continuity Plan did not include nor require growth metrics as part of their annual update, again, only review and reflections of strategies outlined in the plan. Greatly, due to the efforts of our teachers, our school and district staff, administrators, and parents and guardians, we saw a lot of successes in core enrichment courses being offered. Protection and offering of instructional minutes all were thoughtfully prioritized in both distance learning and in-person instructional programs. San Marino continued to increase access to connectivity, as we were just discussing, to ensure that all of our students and staff had access to the curriculum, to learning platforms through continued Chromebook distribution that would help support distance learning programs and platforms such as Schoology, Zoom, Google Classroom, and so forth. Pupil participation in progress continued to be monitored through PowerSchool to support engagement and monitor participation. Attendance monitoring through distribution of absence notifications as appropriate was also implemented to support participation. And lastly, professional development, including but not limited to UDL, Universal Design for Learning, positive behavior interventions and supports, screencast videos, and much more, continued as a priority and was embedded within the distance learning schedule to best support teachers, staff, and students, as well as address learning variability and challenges with distance learning. Next slide. Supports for students with unique needs included, but were not limited to, in-person learning cohorts, tutoring and office hours, breakout rooms, educational assistance supports, and more, to ensure appropriate and supplemental learning opportunities to address any learning regression and/or barriers to learning, as well as foster community and connectedness for all of our students. Pupil learning loss was monitored and assessed as best as possible through formal and informal assessments, progress monitoring and participation and engagement, intervention data, and the data was used to adjust instruction and supports as needed in efforts to mitigate any type of learning regression. Continuance of mental health support was also critical during this past year. Titan Wellness Center continued outreach efforts to provide supports and services through interns and expanded university and community-based partnerships. Given more than a year of school closures, a continued need exists and was identified for mental health supports and services moving forward. As of the development of this presentation, you can see we had 92 Wellness Center referrals noted. At the close of this school year, the 2021 school year, there were a total of 104 referrals. And expansion of parent and pupil outreach and engagement was also critical through this past year to ensure that our parents and our students were informed and engaged and encouraged to be active participants in their learning. Outreach was conducted mostly through virtual platforms, Zoom, Google Meets, various instructional programs. The San Marino Unified School District Liaison was vital in providing translations and interpretations for parents to access information and increase participation. And then lastly, school nutrition services continue to successfully provide healthy meals to all students at no cost through the 2021 school year. And at the development of this presentation, over 35,000 lunches or meals have been served through the district's grab and go meal service. And that's very impressive. Next slide, please. So this brings us to our 21-22 LCAP. Analysis and review of the 2019-20 LCAP, as well as the 2021 Learning Continuity Plan provided the committee valuable insight to the development of the 21-22 LCAP. Analysis of these plans, as well as considerations for anticipated learning regression due to more than a year of distance learning, two critical areas emerged as needing expanded and continued focus and address: student achievement and social emotional well-being and mental health. San Marino Unified School District LCAP Stakeholder Committee substantiated the importance and need to continue to maintain an unwavering commitment to these following areas for the 21-22 LCAP. As such, the following priorities highlight and characterize the 21-22 LCAP goals and actions: strengthening and expanding academic and social emotional and mental health supports and services district-wide, not only at the high school, but trickling down to the middle and elementary schools as well. Providing personalized learning opportunities that best support and address learner variability, remediation, as well as enrichment. And then maximizing teacher capacity and expertise through effective research-based professional development opportunities. And then lastly, for this slide, I'd like to mention that the May revised budgets that were received late in May is required to be reflected in the LCAP. As such, the budget overview for parents, which highlights the estimated LCAP expenditures are currently pending completion and will be added within the next week. And so they will be provided to the board and to the public by the June 22nd meeting. And next slide. So for the next few slides, I will briefly review the proposed 21-22 LCAP goals, metrics, and actions developed by our LCAP stakeholder committee. Goal 1 highlights a focus on supporting and promoting exemplary teaching and learning, personalized learning, and ensuring college, career, and life readiness for all students. Metrics identified are listed here. I'm just going to name a few of them because they're listed for your review. CASP, College and Career Readiness Indicator, English Learner Progress, English Learner Reclassification Rates, Pass Rates, AP Pass Rates, and UC CSU Eligibility Rates. Actions developed by the stakeholder committee to help meet these goals include the following: expanded learning opportunities to address learning regression and increase student achievement. And I'm only going to read a few because they are listed there. Retaining counselors to provide academic and social emotional supports and career and college counseling. Teacher on special assignment to coordinate and implement programs and services aimed at increasing English language acquisition. Summer school beyond extended school year for students with special needs. Delivery of designated integrated instruction. Increased access to AP and honors courses, expansion of CTE pathways, dual enrollment and articulated course offerings, administration of diagnostic assessments to really assess and monitor student learning. And next slide, please. And then for goal 2 really highlights a focus on flourishing learning environments that support the social, emotional, and physical needs of all of our students, and provide services and conditions that support student learning, as well as providing teachers with tools and training to implement state academic standards. And as you can see, the annual measurable outcomes are listed here: fully credentialed, appropriately assigned teachers, facilities in good repair, access to standards aligned instructional materials, technology access and connectivity, and then again, the climate surveys, which are really important for the students, staff, and parents, as well as professional development. So really putting the supports and tools in place to create a learning environment conducive to academic learning as well as social emotional learning. And then the actions are also highlighted here. And then the next slide, please. And yes.
In good repair. So I don't know how we budget for the repair. So without the bond, I don't know in the future we are able to do that or not, right?
Which I think, based off of our school accountability report card this past year, all of our schools, school sites and district site were reviewed and listed as in being in good repair. So there isn't any outstanding urgent repair that needs to be done at this point, but moving forward.
Facility.
Yeah.
In a good repair.
Yes, we don't have an adequate amount of money in our deferred maintenance account to be able to sustain the repairs that need to be made to HVAC systems, as an example. Currently, we're looking at using some one-time money to be able to address those kinds of needs, facility needs.
So this I think this is the area for a long-term plan. We need to educate the community. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chang. And then lastly, goal 3 really focuses on meaningful and authentic connections and highlights a focus on creating positive environments and opportunities to connect students with their schools and their communities, building community and inclusion, as well as engaging families and community to support student learning. And then again, the metrics are listed here that we'll be looking at: absenteeism rates, attendance, Titan Wellness Center referrals, suspension, dropout, expulsion rates, and then participation rates from parents in district and site-led committees, and events and activities, as well as climate survey outcome data. And then the actions are also listed here. One of the other things is, in addition to an academic diagnostic assessment to identify and monitor student progress, we are hoping to also identify and secure a social emotional learning diagnostic or screener to continue to assess the status of mental health for all of our students so that we can put appropriate supports in place to support them. And the next slide. And lastly, this slide illustrates the 21-22 LCAP approval timeline. Tonight is the LCAP public hearing, and on the next regularly scheduled board meeting on June 22nd, the LCAP, as mentioned earlier, will be brought back to the board with recommendation for adoption. And then on or before July 1st, the approved LCAP and budget will be submitted to the LA County Office of Education. And the next slide. And this concludes my informational presentation for this evening, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Dr. Richter, this report, this local control accountability plan is just exceptional. It's excellent. I have read probably over 100 of these, as you probably know. This is exceptional, primarily because, and I'll point this out in case we might have missed it. When we're looking at goal 3, and when we're talking about meaningful connection and engagement, this is really at the crux of mental health and social wellness. And when we have this piece, this allows us to get to goal 2, which really helps learning to flourish and really helps us to have that climate and that healthy environment that we need in the schools for our children to thrive. And it is in that we can attain our goal in terms of goal 1, which is the exemplary learning environment, which allows our teachers to really take the content and really help the students to establish themselves for reclassification, graduation, UC eligibility, AP passage rate. And that's like, it's excellent because it looks at the foundation of what you need before it can go. So just an excellent job. I guess I'm a little biased.
Well, I appreciate the feedback, and I have to say that I wish I could take full credit for it, but the LCAP stakeholder
just
committee.
An exceptional teamwork. I think it
Absolutely.
speaks to your leadership, but it also speaks to the strength of the teams here at each of the sites, as well as in our community. Just genuine effort from everybody. So thank you.
My pleasure.
Is there any further discussion or comment?
Thank you.
I actually wanted to say something. So I wanted to say thank you as well. I read it and I got really excited. I got really excited because it was exactly as President Ryan said, really building and scaffolding on the needs of our students from the emotions all the way, social emotional, all the way to their academic excellence and health. And I think coming off of a year of COVID, that is really the progression and the perspective we need to keep. We need to make sure we're meeting all of their social, emotional, and their physical needs as we move on to academic excellence. Right. And I really just was very excited to see that direction that we're moving in, because a lot of this really lays the groundwork for that strategic planning that we're looking forward to doing as a board over the next few months, so that we can really reach that goal of that long-term educational master plan, so that we can really figure out where we're going in the next few years, so that we have a plan that everybody can really rally behind. And one thing that I noticed, and you may not realize this because it was before you got here, but the work that this work actually started, those goals actually started with Mr. Kurtenbach, when he was at the district level, and he worked with the LCAP committee, and they, out of a number of meetings, I mean, we have these meetings, and then even back then there were meetings before it was derailed by COVID. Mm-hmm. And all of those goals really were born out of the community coming together and emphasizing these are the things we need to be working on. And it's interesting how that all sort of fit together over the last 2 years to bring us to a place where everybody recognizes and shares in those goals together. So I do want to thank Mr. Kurtenbach and that committee during that time, because it really just did lay the groundwork for where we move from here, which is really very exciting. So this is excellent. Thank you very much for all of that work for all 3 years. What was interesting too is that it really did build on itself. Reading them one after the other really showed where we were and where we spent the last year and where we were successful, and then really looked ahead to where we could build more success. So thank you.
You're welcome. Absolutely.
So for President, I like to verify because a couple months ago, we are looking for the LCAP. So the time, we say we want to change the headline. So no more for the academic excellence.
Yes.
But right now, I think that we are ready, right, for that direction.
Yes, and we did, Mr. Chang, we did as a committee review that, that recommendation, and we looked at how else we could address academic achievement, engagement, as well as conditions for learning. And the committee had some very rich discussions about that and came to agreement on exemplary teaching and learning, flourishing learning environments, and exceptional and meaningful connections. And so I think that really captures the direction we want to go in to support the whole child and the whole community.
Okay, good.
Thank you so much, Dr. Richter.
Thank you.
And with that, we have 11G, is that correct? This is public hearing of the 2021-22 budget. This is an informational item, and we will call on Dr. Linda Delatorre.
Thank you, President Ryan, members of the Board of Education, executive team. We have a public hearing of the 21-22 budget pursuant to Education Code 42103. Governing boards of school districts will honor before July 1st, hold a public hearing to afford the public to make comment on the budget.
Thank you, Dr. Delatorre. We will pause for 1 minute to take requests to speak regarding the 21-22 budget. If you would like to make the request to speak, please press the raise hand icon, dial *9, or submit a public comment card. We have 30 seconds remaining. If you would like to speak regarding the 21-22 budget, please press the raise hand icon, dial *9, or submit a public comment card. Dr. Delatorre, we have no requests.
Thank you, Dr. Choi.
All right, with that, are you presenting or we're going to 11?
We're moving to 11H.
Okay, thank you. 11H 2021-22 proposed district budget. Dr. Linda Delatorre. This is an informational item. The Board of Education will review the 2021-22 proposal of the proposed district budget.
Yes, thank you, President Ryan, members of the Board of Education executive team. This evening, I would like to present the 21-22 proposed budget. This budget will be coming back before the board for approval on June 22nd, at which time we will be submitting it to the County Office of Education as required. First of all, I would like to acknowledge and thank our very hardworking Director of Accounting, Mrs. Vanjie Lingott, for working tirelessly on this budget that we are presenting to you this evening. The reason that we did not get the presentation attached to the agenda is we were literally making changes to it right before the meeting. So I apologize for that, and this will be sent out to the public and attached to the agenda first thing in the morning. And we will also be providing copies to the board via email. So the California economy it is not only rebounding, but it is literally roaring back from the pandemic. We were absolutely surprised at the strength of the California economy, as was I think the governor. We have recovered from the pandemic. We began building our 21-22 district budget based on the governor's budget, which was released in January, and made many adjustments up to and including the May revise. California, as you've all heard in the news, received an unanticipated surge in state revenues and very robust federal stimulus funding. What's happening is the top 1% of earners in California are doing exceptionally well. Sales and personal income taxes are up, and the informational technology sector is absolutely thriving. However, not everyone is experiencing a positive impact. We know that the hospitality industries, such as hotels and restaurants, have suffered tremendously during the pandemic. California's unemployment rate is about 8.3%, and we are experiencing difficulty in hiring some of the service positions because individuals are able to make more money receiving unemployment than they are in the workplace. Next slide.
I don't have
Oh,
the
you're not doing my presentation? I emailed it to you.
Oh, let me go
Or I
ahead.
shared it
and
with you, sorry.
Look it up right now.
I thought you had it up. My apologies, I do have a presentation, so we'll get that up for you.
Found it.
Got it? Thank you. So now you can see that I do have a graphic of a lion literally roaring. To illustrate California's economy. Okay, so we're moving to the next slide, which is proposed state funding and funding factors for K-12 education 21-22. The governor's budget included compounding COLA and LCFF. We're getting a COLA of 5.07%. And that is going to be applied to LCFF. We're getting a 1.7% COLA for categorical programs. And the governor also proposed a 4.05% COLA for special education programs. And this will increase the base rate for special education to approximately $650 per ADA, which will help. The governor also proposed to increase the rainy day fund from $8.3 billion to $15.9 billion in 21-22. So that is quite a significant jump in increasing the rainy day fund that Governor Brown started when he was governor. Next slide. So the 21-22 district funding assumptions. The district LCFF funding was projected to decrease by $2.6 million related to a decline in enrollment and subsequent loss of ADA, along with a budget reduction of 7.92% last year, for those of you who may remember that. That did not come to fruition. And therefore, we were pleasantly surprised because the budget that we adopted last year in June was based on those assumptions, that the 7.9% reduction in COLA did not come to fruition, and that helped our 2021 budget significantly. The cost of providing health and welfare benefits to our employees continues to increase. There is also going to be a significant increase in unemployment claims that will end up costing the district about $281,000. To develop a staffing plan commensurate with declining enrollment, the district offered, we offered a supplemental retirement incentive, which was very successful. And we did have many certificated and classified personnel accept that incentive. We were able to save a significant amount of money in doing that. And also, when we did that, we saw a commensurate reduction in step and column increases. So step and column increases in 1920 were costing the district $630,000, and currently it's projected to cost $523,000. So that is helpful. Next slide. So this slide illustrates the increase in COLA applied to each funding level. So you see in the far left-hand column, the grade level, and in the second column over base grant, the augmentation grants, and then the total grant money. So this is the amount of funding that we will receive per student within those grade bands for 21-22. Next slide. So declining enrollment is based on the cohort progression model, which takes into account the current enrollment, rolling it up to the next grade level. And then we take an average of the last 5 years of TK and kindergarten enrollment to project what those incoming numbers will be. These figures take into consideration the state issued hold harmless, which allows the district to continue to be funded based on the 1920 ADA, and we're allowed to do this through 21-22. That is going to be a concern in 22-23, because if this district continues to decline in enrollment, we will have a funding cliff in 22-23 that we are definitely planning for. So the change in LCFF funding is related to a decline in enrollment, whereas in 21-22, there's the mega COLA that is being applied, that 5.07%. That accounts for the increase in LCFF funding. COVID funds, which you see here, include the learning loss mitigation money that we received and part of the in-person grant fund. And then in the 21-22 fiscal year, the amount you see there represents the expanded learning opportunity grant funds. And then moving down to the federal revenues, this includes titles 1, 2, 3, and 4, and also the IDEA funds for special education. Under the Schools Foundation 2021, this includes the We Are San Marino fundraising campaign money, in addition to the annual campaign money. Parcel tax amounts for 21-22 assume that Measure E passes on June 29. We did speak with the County Office of Education, and they informed us that we should go ahead and assume that that's going to pass. And then we will be submitting a fiscal stabilization plan to the board on June 22nd, which is a contingency for board action if Measure E does not pass. Then we would have to lay off a commensurate number of employees tied to that funding. So ESSER funds are not included here, just so that you're aware of that, because if we were to include the ESSER funds here, it would artificially increase our revenues and expenditures, and that would require us to increase our 3% reserve for economic uncertainties. Next slide.
So Linda,
Yes.
sorry, can you go back to the slide you were on?
Yes.
So the change in LCFF funding, we're in 2023-24 is at 47,492 as opposed to what we have this year and moving forward.
So Banji, you want to come up and explain that?
Because, you know, how are we able to run the same programs, address the same goals with basically a third of the funding for LCFF?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question, please?
She's looking at the change in LCFF funding row.
From 21-22 to 22-23?
Yes.
As you can see, it is driven by the second line, which is the funded LCFF funded ADA. So for 21-22, we are using the 2019-20 ADA, which is 2,847. And for 22-23, that's actually our projected ADA for 2021-22. And the difference between those two numbers is about 180 ADA, which is equivalent to about 1.1 million decrease in funded LCFF.
Right. So the amounts here are just representative of the change, the decrease in funding that we will receive. Your question is a good one, but this model is projecting a decline in enrollment. So we would receive $47,492 less in LCFF funding in 22 to 23,
In
24.
22, 23, and then in 23, 24, see, the difference between the two numbers is only about 65 ADA, but with the COLA that is included in the factor, the difference is only about 47,000. Does that make sense?
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
So because of the COLA increasing, so is that you also allocate the COLA increase to each of the APA?
Each of the grade bands. So for 2022-23, there's also a COLA increase in there, and the same thing with 2023-24. The state is projecting a COLA that we have used for our LCFF calculations.
Any other questions on that, Mr. Chang?
Yeah,
Okay,
that's fine, yeah.
okay. And you can just stay there, Vanjie, just in case we have any more questions for
Sure.
you, if you don't mind. Okay. So let's move to the next slide, please. Projected expenditures. So certificated salaries are increasing due to statutory expenses. In addition to that, we added 2 additional workdays to the teacher's calendar for 21-22. These 2 additional workdays are funded by one-time money, more specifically the Expanded Learning Opportunity Grant money. However, due to declining enrollment, it is anticipated that the staffing numbers will continue to decrease annually commensurate with enrollment, so the board is aware. Books and supplies, operating services, and equipment for the current year have increased due to the pandemic and to the infusion of one-time monies that were required to be spent on COVID-19. So looking at those projected expenditures, you can see that for those 3 categories, that there was more money spent in 2021 than is projected to be spent in the out years. And that is due to, again, the infusion of one-time monies and us being required to spend that one-time money on a variety of different supplies and equipment. So the other outgo, just so you're aware, is for the COP payments on the Barth Athletics Complex and for tuition for students who are enrolled in our SELPA programs offsite. Next slide. So lots of conversation up and down the state about CalSTRS and CalPERS employer contribution rate increases. You can see here we have a chart that shows you those increases from 2021 through 23-24. And they're fairly substantial. We have been planning for these for several years now, but it is, again, a factor that is being somewhat offset by the decrease in the number of employees that we have. Next slide. So other sources, uses, just wanted to call to the board's attention again that food services has had some difficulty with their budget this year due to the fact that they have gone from being able to generate income for their program to providing free lunches. So we still have the operating costs of salaries and benefits for her program, in addition to the cost of food and other consumables. And the state has been reimbursing us a certain percentage for the cost of the meals, but not enough to be able to support the other program costs. Therefore, they needed to have $485,000 transferred from the general fund over to the food services account to cover their salaries and their program costs. Our contribution to routine restricted maintenance is required to be 3% of the general fund expenses. So you see that here on this chart as well, from 2021 through 23-24. Next slide. The district is projecting a 3% reserve for economic uncertainties in the general fund. The district will continue to recommend that the board increase its reserve to prepare for the loss, or the potential loss, I should say, of local revenue sources such as parcel tax or foundation revenues. The challenge for us will be that in 22-23, there is a law that will cap local district reserves not to exceed 10%. And it's not to exceed 10% of the combined assigned and unassigned general fund balances. The cap on the reserve is triggered when the rainy day fund is at least 3% of the K-12 share of Prop 98. And as mentioned earlier, the governor is increasing the rainy day fund considerably. One bit of good news is that the district can work with the County Office of Education under the circumstances to receive a waiver for this requirement, and therefore we would be able to maintain more in reserves. And the reason it's important for us to consider increasing our reserves is because of the lessons learned from this past year with Measure E. When Measure E failed to pass in March, the community said, you know, what is your plan B? And our plan B was to do what many other districts in our circumstances would do, and that is to lay off employees. If we had a more robust reserve, we would have been okay for another year without having to go out to the county. So we need to consider what we can do in the future to build our reserves and have a cushion in the event that Measure E or Measure R fails in the future. However, having said that, it is going to be more difficult now that there is this new law that will require school districts not to have reserves greater than 10% of their general fund. Okay, next slide. So it's important to know where you've been in order to determine where you're headed to. So I wanted to put together just a little bit of a budget history that we can build on in the future. So in 2019-20, the district had a budget deficit of $4 million. I think most of us remember that. It was pretty painful. Dr. Wilson came on board and he immediately convened a fiscal resources stability task force, which he called the first team. It was comprised of district and community stakeholders with financial expertise from a variety of different sectors. District staff offered an early retirement incentive, as I mentioned earlier, in order to combat some of the deficit. 18 certificated and 12 classified members participated in the early retirement incentive. When their positions became vacant, the district filled some of them with less expensive employees, and some of them we absorbed through attrition. We did a lot of reorganization of staff. We eliminated some positions. We had many employees throughout the district who took on additional duties and responsibilities. We did a lot of things to try and reinvent the way that we were managing the school district. The Schools Foundation was very instrumental in providing us with $1.2 million that they raised through their We Are San Marino campaign, which saved 14 certificated employees from layoff. So through a combination of employee retirements, reorganizations, layoffs, the district saved $4.2 million in salaries and benefits during that year. We would have been okay as a school district, except for the failure of Measure E in March. If not for that, we would have had a balanced budget and everything would have been fine. So we are hoping that Measure E passes on June 29th. If that happens, we are going to be headed into the next fiscal year with a very strong financial position. In looking at our multi-year projections, we're very healthy in 21-22, very healthy in 22-23, And then we go off the funding cliff that I mentioned earlier in the presentation due to the expiration of the state's hold harmless on our ADA funding. So, so we're going to be working very, very hard going forward to make sure that we are bringing forward to the Board of Education a balanced budget, a budget that reflects a staffing plan commensurate with our enrollment. And we're going to continue to be very fiscally conservative going forward. So moving on to the next slide. For the 21-22 budget year next steps, we're going to continue to assess and evaluate student enrollment, staffing, programs and services, and our budgets. And no later than July 31st, we're going to come back and present a 45-day budget revision if that is necessary. No later than September 15th, staff will present and or submit our unaudited financial statements. And then by December 15th, staff will present the first interim report. And by January 15th, our auditors will come before the Board of Education and they will deliver their audit report to the board. To round out the year, staff will present the second interim report by March 15th. And that's when we're, of course, required to deliver any reduction in force notices for certificated staff as well. Next slide. Looking ahead to the 22-23 budget planning, we are looking at, again, September 21-22 unaudited actuals. So this is a different fiscal year. October through December, we're going to hold district leadership budget meetings. In December 21-22, we're going to present the, for December 21-22, those audited financial statements will come before the board. And then in January through March, the 22-23 governor's proposed budget, future year enrollment projections, board budget study sessions, potential budget savings and reductions will be presented. And then in May, of course, that's when the governor does his May revise and we bring that back to the Board of Education. In June, we'll be back at, providing a proposed budget that we will present to the Board of Education, but that's the year that we're really going to have to, figure something out. And I'm optimistic that we will. Next slide. So with that, any questions from the board?
Just excellent, Linda. I want to thank you for taking ownership and leadership of this. The presentation is very well done, but most importantly, if you can go back 2 slides, I guess I could do it, but I don't want to mess Stephen up. So when we're looking at this, the next steps, I would like to suggest that as we look at increasing our reserves, because now we can go up to 10%, am I correct? Okay, so we're at 3% right now. And if there's a cliff 2 years down the road, we need to go 3% more by next year, and then so on and so forth. So we would be at a reserve of 9% by the time we approach this cliff. As well, this budget reflects the May revise already.
Yes.
Correct? Okay. So moving forward, it is very optimistic as long as Measure E passes and we have that sustained funding for the next 6 years. So we don't have to continue to stress our employees in terms of, this growing and development of quality teachers, and then we have to pink slip them and let them go. And then out again, get quality teachers. And we're very competitive in getting these quality teachers, but we need to be able to sustain them. And so this is really optimistic. I thank you for what you have done. Are there any questions from my fellow board members?
By the way, Dr. Directori, so you already talked to the school foundation leadership. So they think is optimistic to collect the 2 million for the next 3 years.
They are very optimistic, which is encouraging. And, just participating in their meetings, they're having very robust conversations about the fact that, they believe that the community is becoming very energized around fundraising for the schools, which is a great sign. And so I do believe that they will, have an easier time of fundraising in a non-pandemic environment. It's been hard.
Have we looked at ways to address the food service? I mean, we can save all we want, but if we continue to have outlay, and, I get that schools are now becoming a social service. We're providing you the laptop, we're providing the Wi-Fi, we're providing you with food. If you're 18 and under, everyone gets food. I get that, but at some point, is the state going to say to us, it's okay if we pull back a little bit, because, we are a service to the community, but at what point do we stop, right? We're talking mental health, we're talking books, we're talking Chromebooks, now food service. So where do you see us going in terms of that piece?
Well, there is an initiative right now that's being considered that would make the free lunches to all of our students permanent. So I don't see us going in a direction where we're pulling any of that back. I see us going in the opposite direction. However, with that may come some additional funding. And I'm hoping that that is the case. We're gonna keep a close eye on what happens with that initiative, and we will certainly keep the board apprised of any developments or changes and make sure that you're aware of that going forward.
By the way, since the board president mentioned about mental health, so maybe I know for the regular funding, probably no way to get the money, but maybe we need to look at see that they have some non-for-profit organization. They are focused on the mental health, so maybe they may give to the school district the funding. Yeah.
We can certainly look into that. I will say that this district has made it a priority to address the social emotional learning and mental health and wellness of all students, as evidenced by us having a wellness center at San Marino High School, and also the wellness counselor.
Yeah, maybe I check Kaiser Foundation.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
But thank you, Mr. Chang and Mrs. Lisa Ling, for your vision in establishing the Wellness Center, but also the funding for it. I want to thank you. And when we brought in our counselor, she was also able to bring in our interns from the colleges to continue to support the students, because that's the only way in which we can support.
Actually,
9 and 7.
Dr. Wilson is not here. We also connect for the Chinatown Service Center.
Yes, thank
so,
you.
So right now, some of the case, mental health case, they get a referral to there. Yeah.
Right. So thank you for that connection.
Oh,
All right.
I did have other comments and questions as well.
Sure.
So I also wanted to thank you very much for the presentation. I really appreciated that it had a long-term look ahead and gave me a chance to know what was coming down the pipe. And I wanted to echo something that Mr. Chang was saying in terms of looking at other ways. I think that what has been very clear is that we have a community that is very rich in resources, and there are different community organizations and different groups that all really want to pull for the schools, including our city. For example, the city's commitment to support Measure Eve, and so we saw all of the community organizations come out and do the same thing, from the foundation to all of the other community groups. And I think I'd really like for us moving forward to find ways to strengthen those partnerships. So for example, with the first committee, that was a great group. And I'd love to see something like that happen in terms of pulling in people who are the leaders within those other organizations within our community and even beyond our immediate community. We have a lot of people who are very deeply invested in outside of San Marino. like Kaiser Foundation or whatnot. And so to be able to pull that in, that would be something really exciting that I'd like to see us moving forward so that we can have a more comprehensive look at where are our resources, where can we use our resources more efficiently in this time where everybody's just trying to operate in a really lean way. And I think that speaks to really wanting to build capacity for our staff. One of the things I think we're constantly having to balance with is needing to run a very lean operation, but sometimes that stretches our people. And if there are ways that we can really utilize other means to build capacity and build support. I know, for example, we were able to tap into the UDL through SELPA. And so just those kinds of opportunities, if we can really tap into that, I'd like to see us be able to sort of really push in that direction. One other thing that came up, and this was an idea, as I said, being part of that Masters in Governance training, they had made, one superintendent had made this suggestion to look very carefully at our retiring staff. And I know that we just went through a retirement incentive, so we're probably a little bit leaner on that end in terms of having people looking at retirement soon. But if we can look at that in anticipation of if we're going to be in declining enrollment, we do have to anticipate that we're going to possibly be forced to not replace all of our staffing. And if we can really keep an eye to where the retirements might be and try to plan ahead for that, so that we're not necessarily having to let people go at that point, but really looking to replace those, replace and move and maneuvers, because it is so painful for us when we have to issue layoff notices. So if that is something that we can start looking at in terms of where are our people on that step-in column, where are they in terms of their retirement and planning ahead?
And we actually are doing that. Currently, we have studies that are done. We know exactly where we are with the prospective retirees, and we send out a letter of intent annually. It's usually around January, February, asking teachers to let us know whether they plan to return the following year. So that kind of helps us plan prior to the March 15 deadline. And so I just want to reassure you that we are actually looking at all of those components very, very closely.
Great, yeah, because I don't want us to have a reputation where people are not wanting to come here if they don't feel that they are going to have job security with us here. And then one thing I wanted to just mention, and this is more for those who might be listening rather than for the people in this room, but one thing I was honestly frustrated by the governor's budget was that there is so much money pouring in, and yet it is one-time funding. And so it locks us into this horrible cycle where we may want to spend that money on people and only to be forced to let them go later. And in fact, one of the things that Governor Newsom's proposed budget included was a number of new programs. And these new programs with money that's not going to be there afterwards. And I'm very concerned that everybody in the public is hearing, oh, there's so much money coming to the schools. But those monies have massive strings attached to them. And they're strings that we don't have the capacity to take on in a way that's really going to be healthy for us if what we're seeking as a priority is long-term financial stability. So I just wanted to say that because I feel that sometimes we may be a little too excited about people dangling money in front of us that we may not actually be able to use. So I do love the idea of us really being able to build that reserve so that we are not put in that same position that we were a couple months ago, so that we are really looking to be financially stable for a while. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We need to move on to the next item. Since this is an informational item, 12 is communication from the audience regarding matters on the action agenda, and they are to be made at this time. Dr. Choi.
Thank you. We are pausing for 1 minute to take requests to speak regarding matters in the action items on the agenda. If you'd like to make a request to speak, please press the raise hand icon, dial *9, or submit a public comment card. We have 30 seconds remaining. If you would like to speak regarding action items on the agenda, please press the raise hand icon, dial *9, or submit a public comment card. President Ryan, we have no requests.
All right, thank you, Dr. Choi. Next, number 13, action item. This is a procedural item. And we have 13A, resolution number 22, approving service of final notices of layoff. This is an action item. Dr. Linda Delatorre.
Yes, thank you, President Ryan, members of the Board of Education. As we were recently discussing, we have the unfortunate task of asking the board this evening to approve the resolution before you, resolution number 22, to issue final notices for a total of 12.8 FTE, which will affect 16 employees that are identified on page 2 of the resolution. Again, I want to just reiterate that I am optimistic that Measure E is going to pass on June 29th, at which time the Board of Education would be able to rescind some of these notices, but not all of them. And I'd just like to remind the board that we had originally discussed reducing the number of FTE by 8 earlier, and that was not related to the Measure E parcel tax at all. It was related to the expiration of the We Are San Marino campaign monies, in addition to the need to right-size our staffing commensurate with our enrollment. So, and that's an 8.0 FTE that the district still intends to release. And that's not 8 full people. It is around, I think it's 4 full FTE, along with a combination of sections. So with that, we are seeking the board's approval on issuing final notices, which we are required to do.
May I have a motion for this item?
I move to motion to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Chang.
Sorry, I second. I do have a question.
Yes.
So I just wanted to clarify the final layoff notices. These did take into account the course scheduling and requests that were made. I know that the high school did a tremendous amount of work with really creating a master schedule that met the interest of the students. So
Yes, Judy Correnti in Human Resources and I have been meeting with both secondary principals and assistant principals on a frequent basis to really take a hard look at course requests that were received for certain classes and subject areas. And so, yes, this list that you have in front of you does take that into consideration.
okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we have a motion from Mr. Chang. Mrs. Chong, did you second that?
Yes, I second.
All right. Without further question, Mr. Chang, please.
Aye.
Mrs. Chong?
Aye.
Mrs. Ryan? Aye. And the motion passes for resolution number 22. 13B, rescission of layoffs for some certificated employees. This is an action item. Dr. Linda Delatorre.
Thank you, President Ryan, members of the board, executive team. We have a request to the Board of Education based on the San Marino Schools Foundation presentation tonight, wherein they pledged $420,000 should Measure E fail to the district. We then are requesting that from the list that you just approved, that we would rescind 4.2 FTE, which is commensurate with the amount of money that the Schools Foundation has pledged.
Thank you. This is an action item. May I have a motion?
I so moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Chung.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Chang. With that, I would like to take roll call. Mr. Chang,
Aye.
Mrs. Chung,
Aye.
Mrs. Ryan, aye, and the motion passes for
Thank you.
13B. Board Superintendent, discussion items. This is a procedural item.
Yes, President Ryan, I would like to report to the Board of Education that the district received an email today from a community member calling into question the residency of one of the applicants that we have for Board of Education.
So this is just a procedural item, so I don't have to take any action. Is that it? All right, so I can adjourn the meeting? All right. Yes.
Unless there are any comments or
Unless
questions.
there's comments or questions.
Oh, I also have another, as usual before, the outgoing student school board always introduce incoming student school board, but so far we haven't seen the.
Oh,
Yeah, so
We can follow up on
Yes.
that.
so
and-
the next school board meeting, I think the Samarino High School
Jose
administration
usually comes,
should
yeah.
introduce who
Okay.
is the next one. Yeah.
okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chang. All right, with that, the meeting is adjourned.